This house would no longer favor the mother in granting custody of children.
Okay. Good.
Madam Chair, we think it's an unfair world where you just naturally assume the mother is more capable of being a parent to a child. Where you naturally assume that simply because the mother, by virtue of being a woman or by virtue of being this concept of having more familial feelings or more emotionality towards anything, we think it's unfair when you just start favoring mothers when you're granting custody of children. What are we going to tell you in my speech today? I'm going to tell you firstly, specifically what we think the background of the situation is. What's the characterization? Then I'm going to tell you what our policy is. And then I'm going to finally go into my two arguments, which is basically what the role of the mother is in a child's life and why we think that parents deserve equal rights, right? So what are we really from side government telling you today? We don't think that the mother should be favored. We think that there needs to be a completely objective analysis of both the mother and the father in the capability of bringing up the child. Because ultimately we're looking at what's best for the child, right? Side opposition, in order to win this debate, has to come up here and tell us why there is absolutely a necessity to always give the mother that superseding right or out of order. We think that that's the burden of side opposition, right? And unless and until they can come up here and show us that without any doubt whatsoever, the mother can always be prioritized over the father, they cannot win this debate today, right? So what are we going to do? So let me go into this really characterization. How does this work currently, right? We say that current ways of working is really, really discriminatory to men because you just assume that, mothers are these emotional figures. They were the ones who were pregnant for 9 months. They were the ones who had the child in their womb, and therefore naturally they have more emotional attachment, right? We think that this kind of notion is really, really outdated because this really doesn't hold true for the kind of roles that women and men play in the society today. And that's extremely important to take note of. And here is where, and I'm going to talk to you more about this later on. I'll talk to you about how the role of the mother has actually changed from time to memorial, right? We say that in the past, these notions held true because that was the kind of roles that women and men had in the society, right? We say that in the past, women were traditionally the ones who stayed at home, looked after the house, looked after the child, and didn't really go out and work, right? And we say traditionally, the father was the breadwinner for the family. They were the ones who were supposed to go out and financially support the family, bring home the money, and bring home the big bucks, right? We say that doesn't really hold true anymore in society, right? We say we've seen that with changing times, especially in the United States of America, which is so career-driven, right? We've seen women taking up as many jobs in the economy as men are. We see women being as career-driven as men are. We see women spending as much time out of the house as men do. And that is why we don't think this policy is currently reflecting, or this doesn't currently reflect the way the roles of these individuals work in society, right? There are two levels of attachment, the practical attachment and the emotional attachment, right? We say that the practical attachment is pretty much negated in society because women spend as much time at home as men do, right? We say it's not fair to base that kind of emotional attachment simply on that, right? And we say that it's not fair to assume that simply because the father is supposed to be outside working and the father doesn't spend as much time home, that they just naturally don't have that kind of emotional attachment to the child, that they will just naturally not know what is best for the child, right? And this is where we think it's really, really problematic, right? Because we say in that level itself, right? The fact that we're going to trial, the fact that we're going to court, because we're obviously not talking about cases where the parents settle it amongst themselves who should have custody. We're not talking about, and also we're not, and this is a disclaimer. We shouldn't be talking about cases where, like one year after the child is born, the child still needs to feed on the mother's milk, right? That is a biological necessity for the child to be able to develop properly. So we think that it's very important to note we're not talking about those cases, and therefore we don't think those fall in the purview of this debate. We're talking about cases when the child is grown up, when there is a need to objectively analyze the reason grown up. Like, come on, don't be smart about that. Right? We're talking about cases where the child needs to have an objective decision as to who is going to provide the best kind of support structure for the child. Because we think ultimately what's most important is the development of the child. We want the child to have as stable a structure from henceforth as possible. Obviously, the child has already been disadvantaged because the parents have broken up, right? But we think that what's in the best interest is to provide the most stable kind of family structure, right? And that should be the one objectively. If the father is the one with the most stable structure, whether it's an extended family who can help look after the child, whether it's his parents who can help look after the child, then the father should be prioritized. It's not fair just to give it to the mother simply because she's the mother. But yes, go Syed.
But we are kind of nuancing that there's a very clear kind of yardstick to decide who's best for the child, especially in terms of future value of what's best for the child. Tell us what's this clear yardstick that you're defining.
No, we're saying that it's not fair to say that it's an unclear yardstick. It's not fair to say that there is simply because, oh, you know, everything else equal, the mothers are definitely always going to be better. We are trying to say in our debate today that it's never equal. There is always a factor that will take precedence over the other. We also think it's very important to factor in the child's testimony, because the child's testimony will tell you exactly what the situation is at home, right? You can't just naturally assume that the mother will be prioritized. And I think these are all factors I spoke to you about. Let's look at the role of the mother specifically, right? We say that we've always, and it's a very natural tendency for most of us to assume that mothers are more emotionally attached. But like I said earlier, this was true only previously because the mothers actually spent more time at home. And when you spend more time at home, you obviously will be more emotionally attached to somebody, right? But the fact remains today that the mother and father spend as much time equally outside of the house than the parents do. But even so, even if that isn't the case, it's not true that the mothers are more emotionally attached, right? Because we say that when the mothers or the fathers come back home, both are now, it's now a relationship of equals. It's now a relationship where the mother and father take equal responsibility for looking after the child, or equally take the responsibility and time to spend with the child and develop that kind of emotional attachment. But regardless of that, we think by virtue of being parents, they have that kind of emotional attachment, and it's not fair to just naturally assume that simply because a guy is a guy, he is less emotionally attached to the child, right? And this brings me to my second substandard on the equal rights of parents and why we think specifically this is important. We think it's unfair, especially in our society, when we're trying so hard to strive to ensure that both women and men get the same rights. And now you're disadvantaging the men simply because you're assuming that women have the best interest of the child at heart, simply because they are perceived to be more emotionally attached, right? We don't think it's fair to assume that simply because the mother was, 9 months, had the child for 9 months in a womb, that is to be the deciding factor in saying, yes, we will give the child to the mother, right? We think that the fathers are as emotionally affected, and it's not fair to the fathers for you to just naturally assume and give this bias towards mother. These fathers are probably as emotionally affected because they're spending the time to fight this out in court. If they didn't care, they would have settled this outside of court, they would have given the custody to the mother anyway. The fact that the fathers care so much means that it's our prerogative to give them that leeway, give them that sense of at least fighting this out and not disadvantage them simply because of biological factors. For all these reasons, we're very proud to support.
The stance coming from side opposition is pretty simple. We believe that when the legal system judges gray areas in the law, especially in cases of divorce, and I will characterize it exactly when it comes to when this debate is relevant within the custody battle, Madam Chair, we believe that the law should pander in favor of social norms, in favor of the social constructs that are accepted by society. I disagree with their characterization of the problem, that the problem is that men are systematically screwed by the legal system, even when they do put up a fight, even when they are better capable, even when they are in a better position to take care of the children. They paint a very skewed, very simplistic picture of what's going on. So in my rebuttals, let me deal with that. So basically what they said was that, men, basically the legal system doesn't take into consideration, the man's intent, the man's emotional attachment to the children, and that, it just gives a blank, it simply disregards everything, all the feelings that a man might have. Please sit down. This is absolutely not true, Madam Chair, because the legal system is holistic and sophisticated in its analysis of each case of custody battle, Madam Chair. It takes into account the specific context of each family and the people involved in the matter, Madam Chair. So we say that in cases when clearly the father is more competent, more capable of taking care of the child, when the father is more dedicated to taking care of the child, that the court will necessarily please it down, give it to the father, because the courts always rule in favor of the best interest of the child. So the paradigm that they're painting for you, Madam Chair, status quo already deals with, Madam Chair, status quo, which is not affected at all by the status quo. The question then in this debate is how to decide gray areas, wherein both parties are equally competent and both parties have expressed clear intent that they want the child when they are willing to go out on a legal battle to take care of the child, Madam Chair. And we say that in these cases, that the law has a moral obligation to pander to the interests of society at large, to pander to the norms of society at large, because, again, this is intrinsically linked with the best interest of the child. First argument, why the family is a social construct and what this social construct sees as the role of women in regards to child care. Basically, the family, we know that the family is a social construct. That is how the law treats it. The law governs family only insofar as ensuring that, that it complies with what society thinks a family should look like. Please sit down. This is why polygamy is outlawed, even if technically there's nothing wrong with it. Polygamy is outlawed because society does not agree with a kind of paradigm, with a kind of system that it constructs. Please sit down. Gay marriage is also outlawed, even if technically there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that society does not deem it as society at large, rather, does not deem it as acceptable, Madam Chair. So now let's look at what society sees as the role of the mother in regards to child care. In vast majority of the situations, society still holds the belief that mothers are, please sit down, mothers take care of the should take care of the child, and that fathers should go out and should be the primary breadwinner in society, Madam Chair. This is why, please sit down, maternal leave is longer. This is why maternal benefits are greater than paternal benefits, and this is why, many mothers, and the reality is that many mothers still opt to be stay-at-home mothers. Very few husbands opt to be stay-at-home fathers. And we say, if you are the stay-at-home father who would prefer to take care of your child, legal system already deals with that. It's very obvious that you deserve the child more so than the mother. But in the gray area, in the gray cases, the legal system must pander in favor, please sit down, of social norms. Why? Because the justice system, like all other arms of government, are accountable to the people at large. Speaker, sir. In deciding the legal fate of gray areas in the law, they need to take into account the perspective of society, because they are held accountable, because they have a moral obligation to take care, to the society. And we say, if this society still broadly thinks that the mother de facto that the mother should have a greater role in terms of childcare and motherhood, we should pander to that norm. Before I move on, Vikram.
Andrea, social norms might be against what is in the best interest of society, right? In the best interest of society to be in a more fair place.
Please sit down. We don't see how in the case of children, it's not in the best interest of the child to be taken care of by the mother. And this is where my third argument comes in, Madam Chair. Because we say that children are impressionable, Madam Chair. They are a vulnerable member in society. And we're not talking here about children who are above the age of 12, who, by the way, get to choose which parent they get to stay with in custody battles. We're talking here about children between the ages of 2 and 7 who are fairly still vulnerable, fairly impressionable, and who the law deems as unable to make a judgment about which parent they would prefer to stay with, Madam Chair. These are the kind of children who still need as normal an environment as possible in order to develop in a proper manner, Madam Chair. And we say that we should that in these cases, given that the norms are that the mother are supposed to take care of you, that the mother is responsible for inculcating with you the values that you need, Madam Chair, we need the child to be in that kind of an environment, Madam Chair. It's hard enough to live in a single-parent environment, Madam Chair, and we say it's even harder when the kids at school surround you and ask, hey, why isn't your mom taking care of you? Why isn't your mom taking care of you? This is what we expect. This is particularly harmful to children at that age because this creates a psychological dissonance. which further, which is already entrenched in, in the kind of system, within divorced families. You make it worse. You make it worse when you do not enforce some further sense of normalcy, wherein your mom takes care of you instead of your dad. We are proud to propose.